When the sun dipped below the rigid iron fences of the South Korean military camp, the shadows it cast were not only physical. Behind the walls of duty, pride, and discipline, there was a moment unseen, unheard, when one of the world's brightest stars, Kim Taehyung, known globally as BTS's V, found himself breaking. And the only witness to that quiet, trembling collapse was another star who had shined alongside him for more than a decade, Jungkook. What happened during that training session? Why did Taehyung, always so composed in front of fans, his deep voice steady even during turbulent times, suddenly lose grip on his emotions? Why did his hands tremble after they were dismissed? What did Jungkook say? What did he do that made Taehyung finally exhale after holding everything in for so long? These questions haunted not just the fans but also those within the walls of the camp, those who saw a different side of the idol that night. In a space designed to make soldiers stronger, why did it feel like Taehyung was quietly shattering? And why, hours later, were two pillows soaked, one from quiet sobs, the other from silent witnessing? The full story, never before shared, begins with a small but strange clue. A sudden shift in Taehyung's mood after the third week of intense combat simulation drills. No fan cam captured it, no press outlet reported it, but in the letters that trickled out, in the phone calls that carried more silence than speech, something was off. Taehyung's fellow soldiers described him as focused, composed, and determined during the first few weeks of training. He took everything seriously, one recalled. He was always checking his posture, asking the officers questions, never complaining. Even when others struggled, he pushed through. But the change came after the night march. A 12-kilometer stretch through mud, rain, and fog, carrying 20 kilos of gear, after a day of near-constant drills. The kind of challenge that tests not just muscles but minds. It wasn't the march itself, some said. It was what came after. Witnesses describe a moment when Taehyung sat down at the barracks, removed his boots with trembling hands, and stared at the ground for over 5 minutes without speaking. His breathing was irregular. His usually alert eyes looked distant. Something had triggered him, something deep, perhaps from the past, or perhaps from the weight of expectations. Jungkook, who had entered training not long after, noticed immediately. "He didn't greet me the way he usually does," Jungkook would later tell someone close to him. His voice, it was like someone had turned down the volume on him. He looked like he was physically here, but mentally somewhere else. And so began the unraveling. Quiet, subtle, but undeniable. The next few days brought no improvement. Taehyung's performance didn't falter, but his demeanor did. He began eating less. He stopped writing letters. Even the night when soldiers were allowed to make one phone call, Taehyung reportedly stayed back. The moment caught Jungkook's attention in a way nothing else could have. "Taehyung is not the kind of person who gives up phone time," Jungkook whispered to a fellow recruit. "He hasn't said anything, but I know something's wrong." And then came the day of the panic.it happened during a grenade drill. Soldiers were asked to simulate the act of throwing real, but deactivated, grenades into a trench while ducking for cover. Simple, mechanical, but something triggered in Taehyung. Something no one expected. He froze. Not for long, but long enough. The instructor noticed. So did the others. Taehyung's face had drained of color. His breathing quickened. His eyes didn't look at the target. They darted, searching the horizon as if he expected something, or someone, to emerge. He whispered something. No one could hear what it was. Jungkook, standing several meters away, dropped what he was doing and jogged over. His voice was soft but firm. "Hyung, look at me." Taehyung didn't. Jungkook placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. You're not there. You're here. Look at me." And that's when Taehyung finally blinked and spoke. I don't know what's happening." Those 6 words shook Jungkook more than any explosion ever could. That night, the two didn't speak much. They just sat in silence away from the others behind the storage barracks. The moon was faint, the air thick. Jungkook offered him half a chocolate bar, something they both saved from their ration kits. Taehyung took it with shaking hands. "You remember when we did that one performance in the rain?" Jungkook asked, trying to offer some thread of normalcy. "We were drenched. You looked like a soaked puppy." Taehyung smiled weakly. "That was the night you pulled your back because of that sharp turn in fake love," Jungkook continued. "You didn't say anything until the encore was done. I didn't want to ruin it for anyone, Taehyung replied, his voice cracking for the first time. Jungkook looked at him carefully. You're doing the same thing now, aren't you? There was no reply. You don't have to, Jungkook said. That night, Taehyung cried quietly. Not in bursts, not with noise. Just silent tears that rolled down, dampening his blanket, his cheeks, and the bond that had always existed between them. The next day, something changed. Taehyung requested to speak with the training officer. He explained that he needed a short break from the field drills, not because he was weak but because he was overwhelmed. The officer reportedly was stunned. Not many soldiers asked for that. But Taehyung didn't do it in desperation, he did it with quiet dignity. And it was Jungkook who stood by him as he did it. This rare act of vulnerability, of brotherhood, of raw honesty, would ripple across not just their unit but their fandom. Fans wouldn't hear about it immediately. But those who noticed the silence in Taehyung's early letters, and the sudden warmth in Jungkook's recent comments, began to suspect. Something had happened, something deep, something they're only now beginning to understand. What happens when the most beloved stars are left alone with their shadows? There was something haunting about the way Taehyung stared at the floor that evening. Even as Jungkook sat beside him, their shoulders brushing under the flickering fluorescent light above their bunk, it felt as though Taehyung was somewhere else. Somewhere no one could follow. Perhaps not even Jungkook. But Jungkook didn't try to speak at first. He didn't press. Instead, he waited, sensing that whatever storm was brewing inside Taehyung needed silence to safely surface. That it would take hours before Taehyung would whisper again. And when he did, his voice barely broke the air. I thought I was stronger than this. Jungkook looked up immediately. There was no judgment in his gaze, only concern, and something else, shared experience. His words, when they came, were careful, heavy with meaning. You are. You're just tired. Taehyung shook his head, but Jungkook continued. Being strong doesn't mean never breaking down. It means knowing when you need help. You taught me that. Taehyung didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. Jungkook took that as a good sign. He continued. Remember when I had that breakdown during the Wings era? Backstage, after the second concert night. Taehyung blinked slowly. You didn't cry in front of us. No. But you found me in the hallway, remember? I was sitting on the floor behind the door, holding my chest like something was crushing it. Taehyung finally nodded. You gave me that bottle of water and sat next to me for 45 minutes without saying a single word. I never forgot that. Not once. And now here they were, roles reversed. This wasn't about fame anymore. This wasn't about image. This was about being human in the most brutal way possible. A young man, stripped of glamour and stage lights, facing the weight of his own expectations. The panic Taehyung experienced wasn't simply physical exhaustion. It was deeper, older, something hidden in the folds of responsibility. He had always carried more than he let on. As V of BTS, he had crafted a persona of mystery and confidence, but underneath there was always an artist sensitive to pain, to pressure, to the unbearable need to be everything to everyone. The grenade drill was merely the trigger, not the cause. What was the real cause? In a quiet conversation a week later, Jungkook would find the missing piece. Taehyung finally confessed what had been eating at him since the beginning of training. It wasn't just the physical strain or the early mornings. It wasn't the cold or the rigid rules, or even the public distance from the fans he cherished so much. I had a dream, he said, eyes locked on the ceiling of their shared room, the pale moonlight casting lines across his face. A dream that I couldn't save anyone. Jungkook tilted his head.